Good evening. Hey, everyone, LinkedIn community. It is a pleasure and our honor to be with you. Just for a quick sound check, I want to make sure that my guests can hear me. Can you all hear me okay? Just give me a little thumbs up if you can. Wonderful. Well, I am in good company tonight, and I wanted to briefly introduce myself. My name is Candy Bryan. I am a senior program manager in the world of HR and performance management. I absolutely love what I do. Started my career journey really in sales, and sales management was kind of the thing you did every day was performance management. And so years later, I find myself in the HR space, and what we do in HR is care for employees. And so this conversation is all about that. It's really bringing care, a caring platform, a safe space to LinkedIn. And I'm joined by friends and um, the people who have the expertise in the area of mental wellness and mental health. So we're going to go around and introduce ourselves for just a moment. We'll start with you, Jerry. Just a quick introduction, and then I'll toss it over to Marilyn and Rob, and let's introduce ourselves to the LinkedIn community.
Sure thing. Well, I'm Jerry Bahari, and I am not an expert in mental health or anything like that. So I can't take credit for those things like Rob and Marilyn can. But I'm a guy who's gone through some things. I've got some experiences to share as far as the employment situation and the layoffs that have been happening recently, and what I've done to try to push through that and really kind of find my path after that trauma, as we'll put it. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Well, Jerry and I go way back, as we were sharing before we came on live. Jerry and I are high school friends, and can't believe all this time, all these years, we didn't even know we worked at the same company. So that was really just a joy to reconnect with you, Jerry. And you shared your story briefly on our community chat. We did an audio version of this conversation a week ago. And so I've invited Jerry here to be just a living testimony, a testimonial to what can happen when you begin to pursue what you're really passionate about. But also joining me tonight are experts in mental health. We have Marilyn Shaw and Rob Jenkins. So, Marilyn, would you introduce yourselves to everyone?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Candy, for having me and also for leading this important conversation. As you mentioned, my name is Marilyn Shaw. I'm a clinical counselor intern with Life Counseling Solutions. I know it's a mouthful there, but I'm also a graduate student at Emporia State University. I love all things mental health, and my sweet spot actually is bridging the gap between faith and mental health. So I'm excited to be able to have this conversation, provide some insight to the listeners today.
Marilyn, welcome. Thank you again for taking time out. It seems like we got a little bit of daylight left with you on the East Coast. And folks that
Yes.
are joining, there's many of you that are probably joining from the West Coast, which is where I am in Washington. And then we've got friends on the East Coast as well. So I want to turn it over to Rob. Would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Rob Jenkins. I am a mental health counselor student at Life Counseling Solutions as well. I am a graduate student at Antioch University, and I really specialize in narrative and how narratives affect us personally and collectively. So that's really where I come from.
Well, let's kick off the conversation. If you are tuning in our LinkedIn community and you can share this or repost this, hopefully this will be played on replay over and over again and shared throughout the community. What we're talking about today or tonight is overcoming work stress through mental wellness. And Rob, and we'll get Marilyn back here in just a second, will give us some tips and ideas about how to stay resilient, how to stay mentally well in the face of layoffs. I'm sure both of you have heard of the tech layoffs recently.
Mm.
I read an article that put us at like 80,000 plus layoffs just in the tech industry. And recently, the organization that I work for also going through transformation. And so personal friends have been impacted. And so if you're watching this evening or this afternoon, wherever you are, just hit share. And also we'll have contact information for Jerry, Rob, and Marilyn joins us. And you can reach out to them, reach out to me as well. And I will put our information up on the screen. But let's kick off the conversation. And, you know, Jerry, you and I have had very different experiences in what the road looks like after a layoff conversation, which of course, Rob, as you know, and you've probably talked to several people in your community who feel the stress of that. It is pretty traumatizing. When I had the conversation, it was instantly tied to my identity. Like I'd worked and I've been at the same company for over 20 years. So when that was ripped from me, it was a super gut punch. And I, threw myself into action to go find the next opportunity internally because I really wanted to be stable and stay in the same place for my daughter and not have to move. And there was a lot of things I had to juggle all while being a mom. And it was really traumatizing for me. And the silver lining and the blessing in disguise was that I ended up falling in love with the new role that I have. This is the opportunity of a lifetime for me and where I need to be. So I've shared my story, Jerry, on LinkedIn, so I don't have to go into detail because people can go back and watch the video. But I want you to tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of what you're doing today, because it's really a fascinating and an exciting story.
Well, yeah, not too different from yours, Candy. Also, with the same company for over 2 decades, and it is traumatizing when you get that call. It's very much the case where, like you said, it's tied to your identity. When you spend that much time with a company, I mean, you really you do start to intertwine your personal self with your, with your company, and you do take a lot of that on, right? And I think I've mentioned this in the previous call. It gets to the point where if somebody bad talks your company, you're ready to throw hands or something, because you take it personally, and so you've invested this time in the company, and you've all this time, effort, you've spent time away from your family, you've sacrificed so much over that span of time, and we're not even talking like your 20 plus years or my 20 plus years. I mean, if you're with a company 3, 4, 5 years, it can still hit you the same way. So I was not prepared for that call when it came February of this year. And everyone's going to have to deal with that. Everyone's going to have to process that how they process it, because nothing prepares you for that shock. Initially it's going to be shock, it's trauma, it's this feeling of betrayal, right? Like, how could they, right, after all that I've done and I've given. But for me, after that first hour, I was able to settle and think to myself that there's going to be a silver lining around this dark cloud, and I just need to find it. A door may have closed, but there may be 50 that open, and now it's up to me to go out there and find what that path is. And so it didn't take long for me to kind of find that path. I have been doing voice acting work for a number of years as a side gig, and that also led to on-screen film work. And I had gotten a taste of that while I was still employed with T-Mobile. And honestly, there was a lot of this work that was coming in that I kind of had to push back because I couldn't have a conflict with the day job. And funny enough, it was the day before, the day before I got the call that I'm being let go, that I was kind of like, this is rough because I love doing the voice acting and the acting. It's tough to go out there and be on set filming a movie with Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana and these folks, and then I come back after I take my time away and I'm sitting here in the home office like, yeah, this is not as exciting anymore. But that's where I went with it. I said, I'm going to just put my effort full steam into the acting and the voice acting. And it's a grind. It's a long, slow grind before you can really get traction. But thankfully, I had already had the company, my business running on the side. And now today, for instance, I just cut a spot with Academy Sports and Outdoors to be, their national brand voice for a campaign they're running now. And just great things have been happening. And it has the opportunity for me anyway, the potential to be so much more lucrative than anything I've done before. So it's just one of these examples of, sometimes life has to give you that kick in the rear to put you on the path you were supposed to be on. And that's kind of how, and I've kept positive the whole time. My wife was stressing. The kids are even kind of like, what's going to happen? And I've been smiling the whole time because I've never been this happy. So, looking forward to what the future has to bring.
Congratulations, Jerry. I mean, if you just joined in the conversation, we're talking about mental resilience, what to do in the face of these layoffs. And for some of us, the story has ended where one door closed and the door the opportunity of a lifetime open, and that's Jerry's story. So I would invite anyone to connect with you, Jerry. I'm going to put up just an email address because you do voice acting, and we want folks to hire you. I saw some of your campaigns that you just recently been a part of, and it's exciting, and that's a good story. So when we had our conversation the other evening, I kept getting messages about, man, I needed to hear that what was happening. I think you said it wasn't happening to me, it's happening for me.
Yeah.
And that resonated with some people. I got the sense that evening that there were a lot of folks out there who really struggle. Maybe it's uncertain where they're going to go at first, or maybe they're not, maybe they're just facing the layoff conversation, waiting for it, and there's stress that keeps building up. So we have Rob and Marilyn joining us tonight, and I kind of wanted to kick off the conversation with our experts in mental health. What are the warning signs that, stress and anxiety is kind of underlying there? What does that look like for different individuals? Whoever wants to kick us off with that, Marilyn or Rob.
Sometimes the signs, they can go unnoticed, especially if you are in a high stressed environment. And one of the key things I usually tell folks, if they're wondering if there are signs that are showing up in their life, is if they're noticing they're starting to become socially withdrawn. If they're used to having their schedule filled with certain things, or they're becoming more so irritated in different conversations, or even simple things like having a hard time making small decisions. When you're in a high stress environment, it can inhibit you from just doing everyday things. So if you are constantly moving at a fast pace and you're noticing that you're having a hard time making easy decisions like, what am I going to have for dinner? Or what am I going to have for lunch? Or you walk into a room and like, wait a minute, what did I go in here for? Just small things like that are signs that your mind and body are overwhelmed a little bit more than usual. And if you're someone that's used to socializing and you're starting to withdraw yourself, that is another sign as well.
I think many of us might even overlook some of that those are signs of stress. And Rob, you've been talking about narrative, and I appreciate that, Marilyn, because I think I experienced that when I had the layoff talk, and I didn't really know what to do with it. So I think you calling that out, folks are going to be listening in and saying, I think I really need to evaluate where I'm at in this space. So Rob, we'll turn over to you. You've been talking about that you focus on the narrative, and I think that really will resonate with many people that are watching. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I would say that I echo a lot of what Marilyn said as far as moving at a fast pace. And I was going to say also paying attention to your relationships. And she talked about becoming socially withdrawn. I also would say that one way to check in would be to, if you were to sit quietly for a while, even just for a minute, and just breathe, what comes up? Because sometimes you may notice like there's like a momentum within you that's still going like this. And you're like, okay, I need to pull back and slow down. Also, lots of mistakes are being made. And you don't have time to sit and go back and say, okay, I got to focus on this. There's usually signs of like, I need to slow down. And where the narrative part comes in is evaluating the character that you're playing in the world that you're in. What is your goal? What's your intention? And what exactly are you laying down as far as how you're getting from point A to point B and the whys surrounding that, if that makes sense?
It really does. Jerry, I'll ask you, what was that transition period like when you first, because you were very tenured at your job as well. What were some of those emotions that you were going through initially? How did you personally work through some of those challenges?
Well, I'll tell you, it was interesting. I've not been in this position before, so I wasn't quite sure how to react. So I was still ever the most dutiful employee, even though I'm about to be an ex-employee. And I thought, well, okay, I've gotten this notice 60 days in advance. I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to make sure that, I hand off the work. I make sure that I don't leave any gaps, that, no one's left in a bad situation when I'm gone. I just, again, thinking about the company, because that's what we've been conditioned to do for so long. But then I started to realize that I've been taken off of this distribution list and pulled out of this team chat room and that one. And I'm like, I want to do my part. I want to contribute, but it seems like I'm kind of being cut off at this point. So after about 2 weeks of trying to do, my part, I realized that, it wasn't going to be this kind of, long, happy goodbye or whatever. It was rather abrupt. So after, again, about a 2 week point, I really just kind of threw myself into the new thing, because the one thing that I know my situation is not necessarily going to be everyone's situation, but given the tenure and everything, there was, a very generous package that was given. Well, I'm talking about severance, and so I looked at that as, this is my golden parachute. If I wanted to go into voice acting or acting, under any other circumstances, I would have to quit and then lose that security, right, of the paycheck, and then find a way to make it very quickly ramp up, which is almost impossible. But now I have this gift, this severance that's going to sit here and enable me to have this runway so that I can ramp up and take off. And so that's kind of what the transition was for me, is looking at it again, the silver lining, right? I wasn't just thrown out into the street with nothing, left with nothing to fend for myself and my family. And it's just been working out great, to where that money has kept me afloat, kept my family afloat. My wife is a registered nurse and still gainfully employed, so she took on the insurance and everything like that. But I have this support structure, and it's been great, because these dreams don't happen oftentimes on your own. You need that support system, and I've had that. So I understand that it's not everyone's situation, but I was fortunate enough to have those things to keep me afloat as I chase these dreams.
And let's talk about that for Marilyn and Rob. You just named probably 5 or 6 positives out of this devastating situation. Being cut off, feeling alienated, people who are your work friends, the people you see every day. Now you're like a pariah. They don't talk to you. Those are all really traumatizing things. I think I experienced them. Many of my friends are experiencing that now, just being cut off. Yet, despite that, you had some thoughts that were coping mechanisms that kicked in, maybe naturally. So I kind of want to hear from Marilyn or Rob. What are some coping mechanisms we can all utilize or learn about and be able to use those as folks are going through this? And by the way, if you are just tuning in, or if you're going to watch this on replay, share this with someone. We know that there's a lot of folks that are facing layoff, and a lot of folks that are just facing, not just facing, but are facing work stress. Because I don't want to minimize that it's just work stress. If you're still employed, it really takes a toll on us, but there are ways to cope. So talk a little bit about that to us, Marilyn, about how can we cope?
The good thing about Jerry's situation, it's a prime example of how he turned his narrative into an opportunity to excel. And that's an example of mental resilience. While it's easier said than done, but the best way to look at work stress or a transition, or really it's what it is, it's a transition. You're transitioning for what seems to be a foundation that is stable to an environment that is unstable, unpredictable. And because of that, one thing I usually like to share with folks that I'm working with is the goal here is to develop things that give you stability in an uncertain environment. No, you can't necessarily change what has happened, but the ability to start working on things that will give you stability is important. So there's an acronym I would like to share with the listeners today, which is called MAP. These are 3 easy steps that you can implement that will help you to build that resilience. And it also gives you direction around how to navigate through the process. So the M stands for movement, the A is for advancement, and P is to process. Movement is so important when it comes to de-stressing. We may not always have the language to describe how we're feeling, but engaging in activities that can move the body helps to de-stress and give you a chance to process those things that are coming along. Advancement is your actionable steps to move forward. So, like in Jerry's situation, he was able to take what, the system that he had with his wife and the severance that he received to move forward in advancement. So, for other people, it could be updating your resume, or if you're someone that's left behind and you lost one of your coworkers, you could be a reference for them by writing a reference letter. The idea is to do tasks that will advance through the process. And the last thing is processing. Our emotions are real and you should not diminish that. And you should allow space and time for you to process, whether it be with a therapist, with a good friend, but don't suppress those feelings. Because, like Jerry shared, his desire was to continue to contribute to this company. But unfortunately, that wasn't afforded to him at that particular time. But it allowed him to propel and to move forward. So I always like to tell people, map it out, get moving, advance, and to process.
So good. I was looking at, can I type this out while she's talking and put this on the screen? But I think I can do one better than that. I can actually have folks that are watching, please share this replay, and also connect with Marilyn, Life Counseling Solutions. Your information's on the screen. I think if people want more about what you just talked about, they should connect with you. I think we all need kind of a roadmap. Some of us kind of jump into action and we're doing those things. We don't even know that there's actually a name and a method to it. And I really feel like, Marilyn, you can help so many people that are looking for a way out. But we'll kick it over to you, Rob, to chime in and on your thoughts as well. Jerry, you had your hand up. I didn't know if that was amen or if that was
Actually, yeah, kind of both. But this is a question, and I will kick this to Rob because it's kind of his moment to speak here. But one of the things that I've seen some people do differently after going through this kind of change is that some people feel like they've got to get right on it. Candy, I think you said that was your mode, right? Get on it, start putting the resumes out, start looking for the next thing because you feel like you have this duty and obligation. You've got, family to take care of and that sort of thing. And other people I see, they will kick back and say, you know what, I need to stop, pause, reflect for a bit. I need to take a week or two off before I run right back into it. So what, Rob, would you suggest? Or is it just kind of a, to each his own sort of thing, to each his or her own?
I definitely would say that it's contextual depending on the circumstance, but I cannot stress how important processing is in the whole process. Processing through your emotions. So one thing I talk about is grief. And I feel like when you're let go from a company, especially one that you build community with and you with for a long time, it's like you're excommunicated from that. And it's good to process through the emotions that has left, process through the experience instead of just jumping on to the next thing, because then that can just be even more stressful. Stress is like a ball. It's like it pulls its tension. It can make it harder to think. It's not good for your body. Makes you tight. It doesn't allow for movement. That's why I believe Marilyn brought up what she brought up was movement. Let that out of your body. You need to find ways to let that energy go so you can make room for new energy to come in. So that way you can move to the next thing. Also, the more you process, you may get ideas. Things come from that as well. Creativity comes from processing. So taking that time to reflect, I do believe is very important to have an understanding of what your next move is, because maybe you realize that this isn't even what you want to do anymore. Maybe you want to go in a different direction. And all that comes from processing.
No, it's an excellent question, Jerry. I had some questions here that I want to make sure that we get to. We're going to be on here for about 10 more minutes, and this has been a really rich conversation. I want you all to know that I know that you've been touching lives just by what you've been sharing, and hopefully we can have more of these conversations in the future. But let's take a step back for just a moment and let's define stress and what it does to the body, maybe in a physiological sense. For either one of you, what is stress, if you can define it, and what impacts does it have on the body?
So with stress, the one thing I will say is, Rob mentioned it perfectly, is that it does feel like there is this immense amount of tension. And most of the time when that happens, it's usually there's an increased heart rate, tension around the neck and shoulder area. Cognitively, it's harder for you to process things. You may be a little more irritable, impatient when things usually are better, or you're able to adhere to things a little bit easier. And the key thing about stress is it's not uncommon for us to experience stress. But the difference is, especially in a work environment, is an enormous amount of stress for an extended amount of time. That's the difference. You know, our bodies are it has the capacity to handle stress, but it does not have the capacity to handle stress for an extended period of time, whether it be days or months over the process. But it's important for, like I mentioned earlier, when you don't have the words to say how you're feeling, you can most of the time feel it with inside of your actual body. That's why you hear all the time about how important exercise is. And another thing I wanted to mention is that the World Health Organization actually categorized burnout as a syndrome. That lets you know that how important it is for people to really pay attention to the effects of burnout. And it's described as when you have when you're in a very stressful environment, you're feeling like you're burning the candle from both ends of the sticks, or if you start to notice that your language is changing, where you're saying, I never can do X, Y, and Z, or this always happens to me, where your language starts to transition to where you feel like you're constantly in that ball or the box all the time. And it's key for the listeners to understand this. The one concept is that burnout is real and it does impact your body. And if you are in a burnout situation, it's vitally important for you to develop habits that can remove you from that space, whether it be you going after your passion, whether it be you even considering a new career. But stress, the key thing is that it's not intended to be a long-term experience, but it's important for you to develop habits that will allow you to decompress or de-stress.
And I'm sorry if I may chime in. Marilyn, Rob, both, please kind of keep me honest on this. I think that because we're talking about workplace stress, and I'm quite a few years removed from sort of the clinical side of things here, but when we're talking about stress, especially workplace stress, we're speaking in sort of terms of it being a negative. But I think that stress can also come from positive. It's change. It's your body's kind of reaction to change in life. Like I have a son who may be graduating, going off to college. Yay, that's great. But there's stress that comes with that. So I think that people need to be cognizant of the fact that too much stress, good or bad, is still going to overwhelm the body. So they have to kind of process that and not think that stress is simply a negative all the time. Sometimes it's you dealing with the good news in life too.
Rob, I know you probably want to chime in here about the clinical side of that. And I will tell you, I'm like shaking my head like crazy because as you were talking, Marilyn, about what stress does, prolonged stress in the body, I'm a breast cancer survivor. And so when I went to get my, they do genetic testing. One of the first things they do besides biopsy and all the scans and everything is they do genetic testing. And I was like, I really hope that it's not genetic for me because I have a daughter. And I never want her to go through what I went through. And at the same time, when you get the answer that for me, it was not genetic, then the question was, well, where did this come from? And I know that, I was a sales manager for many years and the sales environment was stressful. I had stress in my home life. I'm now divorced and just feeling free and excited about life again because I was in a very toxic environment. But all those compounding factors, I know that it was an explosion went off in my body, and it couldn't handle the stress over, I would say it was probably over 6 years, 7 years of constant stress and being in toxic environments, both at home and at work, and probably equally as stressful in both environments. So, Rob will chime in here as we wrap up, and anything else that you want to share with folks that are watching this and reposting this to send to someone else who really needs help and hope tonight.
Yeah, so I was gonna also go off of what Jerry said too, as far as the good stress and bad stress. So there is good stress and bad stress. Good stress can be a motivator to help us accomplish things, to meet challenges, to overcome challenges. But as Marilyn said earlier, it's the prolongedness of that. So a lot of things have to do with us setting clear boundaries. I'm going to work on this from this time to this time, and then I'm done. One thing I also tell my clients is, like, we have many parts of ourself, and all of our parts need to be fed. You may have a part of you that wants to work and do this, and that part can run, but then at some point, that part needs to come back, and let another part that maybe wants to just go out with friends and socialize, another part that maybe wants to read, another part that wants to go for walks, to exercise. You have to let other parts of you and to meet your other needs that you have as well. So I will say that, and I also will say that yes, prolonged stress is not good on your body. I always break things down into the physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and stress can impact all of those. And that tension can constricts. So it constricts in the physical body. You can feel it in the way that Marilyn described in your back. Your mind, it can become harder to focus, harder to concentrate on things. And your emotions, you can just feel the tension. Maybe you're more irritable. People say something and you're speaking louder, you're responding to them, and you're frustrated. You don't understand why. Those things happen, and those are things to pay attention to. You have to observe yourself and check in with yourself. And I think that's the main thing that I would say to the listeners today, is to remember to check in with yourself, remember to be kind to yourself, and remember to set boundaries for yourself.
That's so good. Marilyn, we're going to toss it back over to you before we wrap. What are maybe something we didn't get to tonight that you want to leave with those who are watching, and for those who watch this on the replay? Any other tips or practical steps we could be using to deal with stress?
I would love to just encourage the listeners and watchers to lean into hope, because when you're in a transition like this, it can seem very discouraging, and there's so many uncertainties, or feeling like, is this my only value? Will I ever be able to get to the next step? And I just want to encourage them that this is only a moment. That's it. It's just a moment in time. And to allow yourself to have the grace to go through this moment, and to have compassion for yourself. Self-care is a very popular term, but I like to call it self-compassion. We're easily and motivated to have compassion for others, but when we go through obstacles, it's important for us to have compassion for ourselves. And for Jerry and his ability to, transition to move into his passion, I would encourage others to do the same. Your skill sets that you gain at your job or career can transition to something else, or maybe this is the perfect opportunity for you to lean into your passion, or maybe it's just a sign for you to slow down at some point. So at the end of the day, it's unfortunate to hear about people losing their jobs and going through transitions, but it is just a moment. It's just a moment.
So good. So as we wrap here, Jerry, you are like the success story and silver lining. Does anyone here have any information to share? I've been putting your emails on the screen. I hope that you all will connect. Marilyn, you mentioned you have a podcast. Could you guys just shout out where people can connect with you, or maybe the name of your business? This is LinkedIn, so we're here to build connections and community. Where can they find you, Marilyn? I will put this up so they can connect with you here, but also where else?
If you are into podcasts, I would love for you to tune in to Faith Therapy Podcast. You can listen on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, in addition to iHeartRadio. I have so many conversations with faith leaders and wellness influencers around topics just like this.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And Rob, what about you? You didn't mention a podcast, but you know what? I'm finding out all kind of new things about all of you. So where can people reach you?
So you can reach me. I have a website called robaqua.com, ROBAQUA. I am a creative writer. So I play with narrative. I talk about the creativity of life and how we can use that to our benefit to get to where we want to go. And I'm really building on that. And also, you can follow me on Instagram at BYROBAQUA. So by Rob Aqua. So.
Awesome. Something learned new tonight about you, Rob. That's really awesome. And Jerry, we know that you have a budding career. We're going to see you on the silver screen again and again. And I'm really excited to hear about my friend's journey. Thank you for being here and sharing your story. I know sometimes it's hard to just come on alive and your friend taps you on the shoulder. But Jerry, where can folks connect with you outside of maybe just your email here?
Yeah, they can always find me on my VO website, which is the dulcet1vo.com. And I also have jerrybaharivo.com for those who can remember my name more easily. I'm sorry, I'm just a floating head now on the screen. So that's
we're losing.
But anyone can find me through the website or the email address that you have up here right now. I'm more than happy to talk shop with anyone. There are a lot of people now that I've gotten into it who have always had an interest in this as a career, but never knew quite how to follow through with it. So I'm happy to speak to anyone.
I'll be tapping you on the shoulder, Jerry, show me the ropes, because I've always loved production. And again, thank you all for watching with us tonight. And we hope that something was said that would really encourage you, but you can connect with our mental health experts here. And please connect with me, inspire@candybryan.com. I'm happy to connect, or if you missed any of anyone's contact information, I can plug you back in. So to my guests, thank you tonight. Hope that we can have more of these conversations. I will say that I did a LinkedIn poll the other night, and I shared it with Marilyn and Rob, and it said something like there was more people with levels of stress. So it was like, what is your current stress level? And I feel like it was right about 60% where it's moderate, but then you had that 30 that was it's extreme. So that is the purpose of our conversations. We know there's a wide range out there, but I would encourage any of you to definitely connect with a mental health expert, with Marilyn, with Rob, and there's hope and there's help. So until next time, thank you all for joining me. Have a good night, everyone.